My name is Ewa, and today I'm going to present you the joint work with Anna Lowasz and Anna Matysiak, and I'll be speaking about the occurrence and the spacing, the timing of second births. So the motivation behind that research is that based on previous works, we know that there are several individual level factors, but also institutional level factors that affect or shape the progression rates to second births. However, most of these studies do not really distinguish between the probability of having the second child and the timing when this child appears. So in this study, what we want to do is that we want to uncover the country differences in the second births, distinguishing between the probability of the second birth and the timing when it happened. And we also want to connect it with the underlying institutional factors. In the next step, we also ask whether, this is our aim, to identify specific institutions that can stimulate the second births and also prevent its delay. So based on the previous research, we know that several institutions have been found to impact the progression rates, including the progression rate to the second child. So what we know is that women's labor market involvement and the flexibility of the labor market, for example, measured by part-time employment of women or the temporary employment as well, has been found to positively affect the progression rates to a second child. Unemployment in turn, or the insecurity of employment as such, has the opposite effect, and it negatively impacts the progression rates. The leave policies are also important. However, they are quite difficult to measure because here we have both the length of the leave policies and also the financial compensation that you receive during the leaves. So what we know from the previous research is that in general, more generous leaves for parents, they positively impact the progression rates. And of course, the public childcare has a similar effect. But still, many questions remain unanswered with respect to this institutional support. So, for example, we don't really know whether the expansion of public childcare really impacts the probability of the second child appearance, or it shifts the timing when it appears. Similarly with the unemployment. So, related to the topic of this conference, we can also ask, can institutions shape the timing of the second births, or can they prevent delaying the second births? And if so, which institutions can be important in here? So to answer these questions, what we do is that we use historical data coming from 12 countries, developed countries from mostly from Europe. So you can see the map for Europe, and we also include the US. The dependent variable for us is the time expressed in months between the birth of the first child and the second child that resulted in a live birth. The sample of women that we investigate gave birth to the first child after 1991, and this restriction is because of the institutional factors which can be measured only after this time period, because we also include the Central European countries. What does this mean? Well, this means that we actually investigate women that were born around 1950 to 1985, and we observe them in 1990s till mid-2000. So those are not actually recent data, and I think it's important to stress that given the results that we get. The method that we use is a mixture cure model that basically allows us to model separately the probability of having the second child. Actually, it's probability of not conceiving the second child, but that's important to remember when looking at the result. And also the time gap between the first and the second birth. For that, what we use is the parametric hazard modeled with log normal distribution, so the event history models for those who are familiar with that. So the specification of the models that we use two models specifications. So first, what we do is that we analyze country differences, and for which each woman which we observe in the sample, we know from which country, in which countries she's living. So we basically look whether these probabilities and times differ by country groups to make it just bigger in terms of number of observations. In the next step, what we do is that we replace these clusters with the specific institutions to measure the underlying institutional context, and we examine several policies or factors, because we look also at unemployment, which are listed in here. We apply the between effect model specification, so we want to look at differences between countries, but also at the effect of specific policies inside the country, so that's why this specification. So the findings are the following. So this is the picture that shows the survival estimates for different groups of countries. And what you can see is in here is that there were differences, because those are historical data, between the groups of countries in the progression rates to second child. Around 25% of the sample did not have a second child, 75% of women did have it. But as you can see in the asymptotic of these functions, there are differences between those groups, but also there are differences before this asymptotic lines appears, which should suggest that these countries differed both in the probability of having the second child, but also the time when the second child appeared. And this is what the model actually also shows. So what we find is that countries from Nordic Europe and also Anglo-Saxons, which are the reference group in here, had the lowest probability of not having the second child, so the highest probability of actually having it. But also the time when this child appeared was the fastest compared to other countries. On the other side, we have Southern Europe and Central Europe, where the probability of having the second baby was the lowest, but also it appeared the latest among those countries. So, as I stressed, those are historical data, and we know these countries differed quite a lot in terms of institutional characteristics. So our question is, to what extent can those describe these fertility patterns that we see? And can we actually identify policies that can stimulate second birth and prevent its delay? And those are the results from the model. I know there's quite a lot of them, and I don't have that much time to discuss everything. So what I do is that I want to draw your attention on the direction of the effects, okay? So in red are those effects that negatively impact the probability of having the second baby, and also make the time gap longer. In green, those are the positive effects. Because of the timing, I also want to focus on the delaying of the second birth, as this is the topic of the conference. So I'll be interpreting those results. So what we can see here is that female labor participation and part-time employment and differences between countries with that respect can also help us explain differences in the probability of having children between countries. So higher female employment, higher part-time employment of women, but also higher childcare spending that were observed in Northern Europe can explain why in these countries we observed higher rates of second birth compared to Central Europe and Southern Europe. When it comes to policies, what we show is that very long leaves for parents and also the unemployment that was higher in Central Europe than in the rest of the countries that we explore can explain us the longer time of conception in these countries. When we look at the within effects, it actually turns out that these effects are very similar to the between effects, which means that increased female participation in paid work and also the moderate length of leaves for parents can help prevent delaying the second birth. And to conclude, I think this is the message I would like to give you. Can institutions prevent delaying the second birth? Well, yes. In our research, we show that they can't. And what we find is that shorter time to conceive the second child correlates with higher participation of females in paid work, paid leaves for parents of moderate length, and also leaves for fathers. At the same time, I would like to stress that very clearly, the same factors actually have the opposite effect on the probability of having the second child. So the question remains, what do we care about? Whether we care about having more babies or whether we care about when these babies appear. Thank you.